Create in me a clean heart, renew my soul. Create in me a clean heart, renew my soul.
So the thing that we want to talk about, and I started talking about it in some of the questions that we were looking at the end of the last talk, has to do with the problems that we're dealing with in society right now, and that has to do with morality that is not absolute, that is not objective, and so we're dealing with a couple of different things. One is called consequentialism. So consequentialism is a moral idea that morality is based solely on the consequences of the action. And so nothing is good or bad in and of itself. It's only bad if there are bad consequences, if somebody gets hurt. Okay, so one of the things that a lot of young people are dealing with right now that's a problem is that the only thing that's a sin is getting caught. If you get caught, then you did something wrong. But if you didn't get caught, well, isn't that great? It's like, no, it's not. God knows what you did anyway. And so whether you got caught or not, the Lord's fully aware of what you did. But it's not a question of whether or not we get caught. But what these people would say, for instance, is that, you know, if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you cheat on them, well, as long as your girlfriend or boyfriend doesn't find out, then who cares? No big deal. It's like, well, wait a second, it's still a violation of a relationship. You know, but that's what consequentialism is about. And so, again, it's this idea that I can make up my own rules. But we've now gone further than that, and now we're into what's called relativism. Now, relativism isn't anything new. It actually started back in ancient Greece a couple hundred years before Jesus. And where this comes from is the idea that as they were looking around at different societies and so on, they said, well, you know what? This particular society holds these values important, and this society over here holds these values as important, and there isn't agreement, and so maybe they can both be right. Well, on some things, as we talked about, that's okay. On some things, it's not. And so then there are all these different types of relativism, but the one that we are concerned about today is what's called moral relativism. And so something is right or wrong if you think it is. So you are the ultimate arbiter of truth. Now, what you recognize in this is that there is a denial of God. Because God has given us objective truth. He's given us the 10 Commandments and said these are the things that we need to be about. He's given us moral laws that are absolutes. But if we look at it and say, you know what? You're a good person and you believe this, and I'm a good person and I believe that, well, then it's okay if we disagree. If we believe different things, that's okay. Well, again, if it's about whether or not you like broccoli, that's fine. If it's about whether or not we should kill babies, that's not fine. But that's what they do, is say, well, you got all these different positions and different opinions, and so why can't one opinion be equal to another? Well, as we talked about earlier, because one is about truth and one is about opinion. And so it's a rejection of objective truth. And the whole question of objective truth is what sets aside Catholic moral theology from everything else. We believe in objective principles. The rest of them look at what are called values. So each society has its own values. You can look, for instance, at the styles that people wear. And you can say, well, if you go to this country and wherever it is, this is what they value. They like their hair done this way. They like this kind of style of clothing. Well, you come to America and you say, well, this is the style this year, and this is what we like. These are the values that we have. Well, values change from culture to culture. They change from generation to generation. The values you guys have are not necessarily the same ones that your parents have. When your parents were kids, the things that they valued were a different kind of music. You listen to your parents' music, you probably get sick by it. They listen to your music and they get sick by it. It's a different value. You look at your parents' wedding picture, you're going to laugh that your mom looked the way that she did. I mean, you really did your hair like that, Mom? Yeah, well, guess what? When your kids look at your wedding pictures, they're going to do the exact same thing because this was what was valued at the time. Okay? Values, like I said, they change. Every culture has different values. Every generation has different values. So back in the Roman Empire, they valued the gladiatorial things, putting people out in the Colosseum and letting them go at it until they kill one another. We've just changed it and we call it football now. And that's our value in America. That's what's most important, because there's just somehow nothing greater than 300-pound guys beating each other. And so we've changed values. We don't throw people to the wolves anymore, or to the lions or whatever, but we just do things in different ways. So we have different values. But when we're talking about morality, it's not about values. Because I think any of us can look at it and say, well, okay, the Roman culture held throwing people to the lions as a value. And they packed thousands of people into the Colosseum, and they all cheered as people were being eaten by wild animals. Now, I hope that there's nobody here who would say, well, if that's the way that the Romans like to do it, that's okay. I hope we all recognize that that's wrong. And why would we say it's wrong? Because we uphold the dignity of the human person. We say, no, human persons are made in the image and likeness of God, and they have value. They have dignity. And you cannot violate the dignity of a human person that way. So in other words, we have principles. Principles remain the same from generation to generation, from culture to culture. It doesn't matter if somebody is from South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, America, it doesn't matter. The principles are the same. The cultural values can be very, very different, and that's okay, as long as what they're holding up as a value is not something that's immoral, because then that's not okay. So when Christian missionaries go into different countries, they accept whatever are cultural values. They don't try to change those. But if there's something immoral, then they will try to change those things to teach the people morality so that they are not doing immoral things. And so that's the thing that we have to understand, is that our whole focus has to be on principles. And those are objective. They are the same for everybody, everywhere. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. It doesn't matter what country you're from. Doesn't matter what language you speak. It is the same for everybody. And that's what sets Catholic morality apart from all of these other things, because it's not based on values. If it was just based on values, then we would have to say what this generation likes is better than what that one liked, or whatever. Well, we can't say that. But with relativism, we're looking at the idea that you can decide for yourself what is moral and what is immoral. You can decide for yourself what is right or what is wrong. And so, nobody can tell you then. And that's, again, just listen to the stuff that people say. You can't force your opinion on me. You can't tell me. I can decide for myself. Well, there are some things you can decide for yourself. What were you going to wear this morning when you put your clothes on? You decide that for yourself. However, if you show up wearing something that is absolutely inappropriate, I hope your mom's going to say you get back up to your room and put on something decent. You're not going out looking like that. Because there are objective principles. You're a human person. You have dignity. You cannot be running around presenting yourself in an undignified way and think that that's okay. But consequentialism says that unless somebody gets hurt, then who cares? Relativism says, I made up my own mind. I decided that this was right. I decided what was moral and what was immoral. And so we have lots of young people trying to do things like saying, taking drugs is okay. Doing sexual things is okay. Because I decided that it is. I don't need the church telling me. I don't need God telling me. Because there is nothing objective. It's all up to me. I make up my own rules. So, again, what you've got in that sense, not only is a denial of God, but understand what happens when you deny God, you become God. You are the ultimate arbiter of truth. You become your own little God. But like I said earlier, it's one thing to be able to say, well, okay, we can agree to disagree on this matter. But what happens when I decide what is good is something that's wrong for you? Like, I'm going to break into your house and steal your stuff. You might not think that that's a good idea, but I just decided it is. So it's okay for me. Are we going to say, well, we'll just agree to disagree? Okay, so I'll break into your house tonight and steal your stuff anyway, because I disagree with you. Because I made up my own mind about what is right and what is wrong. That's what we're dealing with in the world right now. That's what Pope Benedict, during his time as the Pope, was constantly harping on, is the fact of moral relativism. Because it's a rejection of truth. And this has been a problem all along. Remember, Jesus went before Pilate, and he said, the reason that I came into the world was to testify to the truth. And Pilate said, truth? What is truth? Well, that was the problem. What is truth? If your truth is different from mine, then what is truth? There isn't any, if that's the case. Your opinion is your opinion, my opinion is my opinion, and neither is necessarily right. Or both are, I guess, is the way that relativists would look at it. Now, the only thing we can really say is that if we have two different opinions, both of us could be wrong, but we can't both be right. Okay, so for instance, I might think I'm absolutely right about something. I'm somewhat colorblind. So as I look at some of the things you guys are wearing, and I would say, oh, that's a nice whatever color shirt you're wearing, and you would say, that's not the color shirt I'm wearing. Well, I might think that I'm right because I'm colorblind and that's what it looks like to me. But you're going to say, no, you're wrong. I'd say, no, I'm not. That's your opinion that you're wearing that color shirt, my opinion that you're wearing it. It's like, no, I'm wrong. I'm colorblind. I don't see it correctly. I'm wrong. We can't both be right if we're both saying something different. If I say you're wearing a blue shirt and you're saying, no, I'm wearing a green shirt, we can't both be right. We could both be wrong. Maybe you're wearing a yellow one and I say blue and you say green and it's actually yellow. Okay, we're both wrong. But we can't both be right. That's where the problem comes with moral relativism, is that everybody is right, which then leads to another problem. And this is a huge problem for our young people today. Everything is a right. I have a right to this. Really? There are all kinds of rights that you have. You're a human person, and human persons have rights. But it's an interesting thing now. We take it to the extreme on two levels. First, we've taken rights away from human persons, especially the unborn ones, and we've given rights to animals. Animals don't have rights. But now we're giving rights to animals, and we're taking them away from people. But on the other side, everything has become a right. I have a right to take your stuff. I have a right to do whatever I want to do. Everything is a right these days. No, it's not. But the problem comes, if we take it one step further, the problem comes in the concept of freedom. As a human person, you have a free will. You are free. Now, in America, we uphold freedom, and thanks be to God. But you would think that the very people who uphold freedom as one of the founding principles of our society would at least know what it means. But we've gotten to the point now where we have substituted license for freedom. License means I can do anything I want, anytime I want, and nobody can tell me any different. Or the way that we do it instead is say, I have a right to do what I want to do. Freedom, perfect freedom, is doing the will of God. Why is that perfect freedom? Because God wants only what's the best. God made you to love and to be loved. To love somebody means to do what is the best for them. Again, we run into, especially young people, the boys will sometimes, if you really love me, you'll do this for me. Like, no. If you really love me, you wouldn't sin against me, and you wouldn't ask me to do something sinful. To love someone is to do what's the best for them, and it's never best to sin against somebody. But if we think that that's what freedom is I can do whatever I want, then it's a wrong understanding. True freedom is doing the best because that's what we're created for. You're made to be loved. That means you are made to be treated with dignity, to be treated with respect. But you are also made in a way that you are to act according to your dignity, that you are to respect your own dignity. When we look at some of the problems that are happening in society right now, it's not only me, but even the secular people are alarmed at the drug abuse problems, the suicide problems, the despair that is happening among young people. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why is this happening? Because there's nothing greater than yourself. Because when we reject God and make myself God, there's nothing greater than me. But all of us are made for something greater, and if I am the end-all and be-all, that's pretty sad. That is a cause for despair. Because there is no hope in our own self. We cannot save ourselves. There is zero hope in our own self, but if we're rejecting God, then who's our hope in? Our hope in the government? Our hope is in some politician? Our hope is in some movie star? Our hope is in some rock and roll singer? Who's our hope in? They're human beings too. They're not God. And so again, there has to be something greater than me. But if there's nothing greater than me because I've already decided God doesn't exist, then I'm going to despair because there's no hope. And so if I look to God, if I say that I believe in God, not just that I believe God exists, because this is again another problem that I hear all the time. Well, I don't go to church and I don't need to follow, but I believe in God. Well, I recommend that you read the letter of St. James, because St. James addresses this issue. And he said, you believe in God? That's good. But the demons believe in God and they tremble. It's like, okay, so you believe God exists. So far, you're doing the same thing as the devil. You're not in real great condition just because you believe God exists. It's good. That's not enough. If you believe in God, who has revealed himself to us, who has given to us a moral code, who has laid out the principles by which we are going to find true happiness in our lives and true fulfillment in our lives, then we have to live it. It's not enough to say that I believe God exists. We have to put it into practice. And that's what God created us for. And so he's given to us the way to fulfillment. He's given us the way to true happiness. And if you look at what's happening in the world right now, like I said, it's obvious relativism is an absolute disaster, or we wouldn't have the number of people killing themselves, taking drugs, doing all these horrible things to themselves, if they had any hope. So we see the result of this. It's a moral breakdown. We don't seem to have any problem with violating other people. We don't seem to have any problem with violating our own selves. Because if there is no God, if we're just products of evolution, now let's put that into context. Remember looking at a video of a professor from the University of Minnesota. And he said, well, the way that humanity started is that two molecules came down from space on a meteor, and they crashed into Earth. And then from some primordial soup, the amoeba started, and after billions and billions and billions of mutations, we come to you. Now that's pretty impossible all by itself, but it's convenient if you don't want to believe in God. But now you got to ask yourself, okay, if I'm just some chance product of an evolutionary chain, what dignity do I have? If that's the case, you have no more dignity than the amoeba from which you started. And on top of that, there's going to be something more, because obviously then we're going to just keep mutating into something else. So we're just going to be here today and we're going to be gone tomorrow, and pretty soon there won't be human beings. There will be something else, because we've outlived whatever we're supposed to do, and now we've mutated onto the next thing. We're not made in the image and likeness of God then, because God didn't make us. There is no God if that's the case. No wonder we're despairing. So you have to understand the implications of this. While on one hand it sounds like a pretty cool thing to be able to say, you know what, relativism is all right. I can make my own decisions about what's right and wrong. I can make my own decisions about what's good and bad. I can make my own decisions about what's true and false. But then understand the implications of that. God doesn't exist. Therefore, what we have revealed by God is fake. The Bible is fake, because God is fake. The church is fake, because God didn't start a church. All the rules are fake, because there is no God to give them. And we're equal to the amoeba. Heck of a deal. So let's go back to the question of Pilate. What is truth? What is truth? For us, truth is a person. Now there are logical truths, so you can look at a logical syllogism and Say, well, all A is B and all B is C, therefore all A is C. Yep, that's true. But for us, when we're talking about truth and the objective, Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. Truth is a person. Jesus is God. St. Paul says God can neither deceive nor be deceived. So therefore God cannot lie. It is impossible for God to lie because he is absolute truth. It is impossible for God to do anything selfish because he's absolute love. So therefore, all he wants for us is the truth, and all he wants for us is what is the best, because that's the only thing God can do. So if we're going to say we believe in God, if we're going to say we believe in Jesus, then we have to say we believe in objective truth, because that's what God has revealed. That we believe in something beyond ourselves. That's why we need to make the right distinctions. So what it all comes down to is making distinctions. Remember earlier I told you about the big umbrella. As long as you throw out the big umbrella, everything can fit underneath it. As soon as you make some distinctions, all of a sudden there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't fit anymore. And so if you just leave everything real vague, for instance, what you'll hear with the people on the news, and this is what happens with the moral relativists. Nothing has moral value. Okay? So they talk about consensual relations between adults. They don't say adultery. They don't say fornication, because that's putting a moral value on something. That's saying that there's something wrong with what these people were doing. So if you just say consensual relations, well, that's just, that doesn't say anything. That's what they're trying to do. They just are neutralizing everything. And as long as that's all that it is, if marriage is just about two people love each other, well, we've got a big problem, because you know what? Jesus told us we have to love everybody. So should we all be getting married? Because in a Christian way, I love you. Well, guess what? I don't think you want to marry me, and I probably don't want to marry you either. But if all that's necessary is two people love each other, then that's what marriage is. Really. So let me ask you this. Out of everybody in the world, who do you love the most? I bet for most of you it's your mom. Should you go home and marry your mom? That's disgusting, isn't it? Why is that gross? Because, hey, if we're relativists, everything is okay. You see, once they decided that they're going to change the definition of marriage, then everything else was okay. Now we've got lots of problems. Once they said two men could get married or two women could get married, they said, wait a minute, marriage isn't between a man and a woman anymore. Well, then 5 people showed up at the courthouse over in Oregon and said, we, all 5 of us, want to get married. And they said, well, we don't know if we can do that. They said, why not? Marriage isn't just between two, and when a male and a female, then who cares? So now we have somebody who's married a dolphin. We have somebody who married his computer. We have somebody who married a pillow. We have somebody who married a robot. And the latest craze, marrying yourself. That is the big thing now, marrying yourself. I will be true to me, and I'll never leave me. Isn't that impressive? No kidding. But you see what happens once you no longer have an objective principle. Everything becomes subjective. Everything becomes relative. I love my computer, so I can marry my computer. I love this dolphin, so I can marry the dolphin. I think we all recognize the utter stupidity of the whole thing. And yet, these people have actually been allowed to get away with this stuff. Because what is marriage anymore? So again, once you make that distinction, if all you do is leave it broad, all that's necessary is that you have to love, Well, we don't even know what the word means anymore, what love is, because is love really doing what's best for the other? Or is love a feeling? Because when I ask young couples who want to get married why they want to get married, they tell me because they're in love, and I ask them what that means. They say, oh, it's this warm feeling we have. Like, isn't that cute? And so I'll ask you the same thing. If the person you love more than anybody in the world is your mom, are you going to go home today and go, oh, Mom, oh, I have such a warm feeling when I'm with you, Mom. It's so wonderful. No, I think we'd all be disgusted by that too, right? So will your mom. It's not about a warm feeling. It's not an emotion. Love is a virtue. And a virtue means that it remains the same. It's about doing what is best for the other. Love is serving the other. It's not about anything selfish, because selfishness is the opposite of love. Using another person is the opposite of love. So once we start making distinctions and saying, no, marriage is not just about two people who love, it has to be way more than that, then all of a sudden, all these things don't fit under the umbrella anymore. So making distinctions is what is critical. And we can only make the distinctions if there's something objective to make distinctions with. Because otherwise, it's your opinion versus my opinion. I think it's okay that anybody who's in love can get married. How are you going to answer that? Unless you can look at it and say, no, we need to make some distinctions. What does that mean? How do we apply this? That's what we have to be looking at. So anyway, I'm over time, and I know you guys had some more questions, so we will address a few more questions. So if you've got more questions, feel free to write them down. We can add them to the stack over here. And there's quite a pile, so I will try to answer them a little more quickly than I did the first time around.
The first question here we have, can morality exist without God?
Can morality exist without God? Well, again, there are some senses of morality. As I mentioned, we have moral relativism. Well, those are people who've rejected God, so they're still looking at some kind of morality, but there isn't an objective morality. Because if there's an objective morality, it's going to be different from place to place without God. So in other words, people in this tribe or in this country or in this town or whatever, well, they believe in this. Here's what their objective morality is. But based on what? Just based on a cultural norm. So again, it's a value. It's not a principle. And so in that sense, there can be some moral norms. Again, we believe as Catholics in what we call natural law. God told us through the prophet Jeremiah he would write his law in our minds and in our hearts. That's on every human person. So no matter what culture you're in, I think people recognize it's wrong to murder, for instance. And so we can look at things like that and say, yeah, there are some moral norms because the law is written in our hearts already. But the problem is, without reference to God, we're going to miss the distinctions and we're going to miss the objectivity, because then it just becomes a cultural value.
So this is going back to a question that we kind of had earlier about homosexuality. And you had mentioned kind of the idea of a disorder with homosexual kind of feelings or attractions. Can you kind of explain that a little more, and how do we know that, if that makes sense?
Well,
yeah.
How do we know that? First of all you have to do is go back to the second chapter of Genesis. God created Adam, and then from Adam's rib he made Eve. Okay, now think about this. Adam had the fullness of humanity in himself. And then God puts Adam into a deep sleep, pulls the rib out, and then makes a woman. So Adam has now lost something that he had, and that is made into a woman. So the fullness of humanity then is going to be found only when the male and the female are together. There is a complementarity, obviously, that isn't there between two males and two females. We are completely different from one another. But women if you look at it in this sense, women have half of what humanity is, and men have half of what humanity is. Understand, in saying that doesn't mean you're half human, but what it means is that we're all equally human because we all have a human soul. But that human soul informs either a male or a female body with all the differences between us. And so women deal with things entirely differently from the way men do. We are so different in everything, from head to toe. They used to say the thing that is closest between males and females is our brain. And the more that they're learning about the brain, the more that they're finding out that male and female brains are completely different too, which shouldn't come as a surprise. All you have to do, again, is look at what's important to both. Look at how we deal with it. How is it that women can do 10 things at once and guys can only do one thing at a time? It's just, it's because women have more of what's called white matter in their brain. And so they get stuff from all over the place. Men don't. We don't have all that. And so women can put all this stuff together. Women are relational. Men are task-oriented. So everything for a woman is about a relationship. For a guy, we can do just the one thing at a time. So that's, you'll understand this. Women will ask men all the time, "What are you thinking about?" The guy goes, "Nothing." She'll say, "You can't think about nothing." Like, guys can. They actually did a study. I think it was out at Duke, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, one of these big East Coast universities, they did a study, and they found that's exactly what happens. When men have an opportunity, there's a place in their own mind where they retreat to nothingness. Because women, everything is connected in a woman's brain. Women cannot stop thinking, ever. Their brains go and go and go and go, and everything is connected to everything. Again, you can ask your mom. If something happens and there's a bill that needs to be paid or something, or there was an accident and the car needs to get fixed, your dad will go, "Okay, well, we got to fix this." Your mom's going to go, "Wait a minute, if we fix that, then we have to take some money out of the bank account. If we take money out of the bank account, then we can't fix this, and we can't do that. And, well, this is connected to that, and that's going to... Your dad's going, "All we need to do is fix the fender." But your mom is thinking about all these other things because everything is related. The guy is just interested in the thing. Well, thanks be to God, women are relational because that's what keeps everything together. So it's not seen as a bad thing, it's a wonderful thing. But it's a difference. It's a huge difference. So, and I say that to be able to say, look at the differences between males and females, not just the physical differences, the way we think, the way we act, the things that are important to us, all the differences. We complement one another. So like I said, from head to toe, your ankles are different, your knees are different, your hips are different, your elbows are different, your shoulders are different. Everything about us is different. But complementary. We fit together. What one has is the opposite of what the other has, so that when the two are united, there is a whole. You cannot do that with two males. It's like having two half circles. If you have two half circles that are the same half, they don't make a whole circle. So if you have one that looks like a capital D and the other looks like a backwards capital D, well, you put the two together, it's the whole circle. But if you put two of the same kind together, it's still got a half circle. It doesn't work. So, again, God didn't create Adam and Steve in the garden. He created Adam and Eve. He created a complementarity. And told them that this is what they are to do. And so remember the number one reason. There are two reasons of getting married, two ends of marriage. One is procreation and education of children, and two is the unity of the couple. Two men cannot procreate, two women cannot procreate. It requires a male and a female with all of their beautiful differences. The differences can drive you crazy if you don't understand them, or they can fulfill you when you recognize what they are. So, again, it's kind of a long, convoluted way of answering the question, but it's to help you to see it's not just a matter of saying, well, gee, I mean, if Joe Schmo is attracted to another guy, isn't that normal or natural? It's like, well, let's look at what God did. And it's like, no, that's not normal. And so we're not saying it's evil. We're just simply saying that's not the way it's supposed to be. So hopefully that answered the question.
This is probably our last question before we take a break, but how come you need to confess your sins to a priest instead of going straight to God?
Well, that'll be in our next talk anyway, but all you have to do is think about this. First of all, God made us human. He knows us perfectly. Every human being, no matter what it is that we have done, has a necessity to tell somebody else. That is a psychological necessity. The police know that. Every single crime that has ever been committed, at least one other person knows about it, because whoever the criminal is has a necessity to tell somebody else what it is that they've done. They also have a necessity to hear that they are accepted and acceptable, that they are forgiven. We can lay on our bed and talk to God. He knows what we're thinking about. But how do we know that we're forgiven? We can hope that we are. You look at it and say, well, gee, if there was enough of an emotional, workup in me, does that mean that I'm forgiven? The beautiful thing with the sacraments, like I was saying earlier, there's an objectivity to them. When you go to confession, you can know that you've confessed your sins, you've heard the words of absolution, you know that your sins are forgiven. You don't know that if you're laying on your bed. But think of it another way. If you guys have a little baby brother or sister, would it be enough for your mom and dad to say, you know what? Let's go lay on our bed and think about whether we should have the baby baptized. We decided we really want that baby baptized. So the baby's baptized now, right? Because your mom and dad laid on the bed and thought about it, right? No. Same thing when your dad decides that he wants to get married to your mom. Is it enough for him to say, you know what? I'm just going to go lay on my bed for a while and think about that, and we're going to be married. Like, no, he actually had to ask her. Or if your dad does something stupid, because women never do. Women never do anything stupid. Only men do stupid things. And so women never have to apologize. But men do. So, if your dad does something really stupid and your mom gets angry, it's good enough that he just goes and lays on the bed and thinks about the fact that he's sorry that he hurt his wife, right? He doesn't have to say he's sorry. He laid on his bed and thought about it. Your mom ought to know. He was laying on the bed thinking about it, so he's really sorry that he hurt me. Yeah, your mom's going to be real happy about that, isn't she? Your dad will be sleeping on the couch because that's not going to sit too well. You have to say, I'm sorry. You have to speak it. You have to hear the words coming back. That's part of human nature. God made us as human persons. The way that human communication works is that we speak and we hear, and so that's why we go to a priest. The priest is the representative of God. He's the representative of the church. He's been given the authority to be able to absolve from sin. Jesus said, whatever you loose on earth will be loose in heaven. He said in John 21, whomever you forgive, they are forgiven. And so that's been given to the bishops, who have given that authority to the priests. And so that's why the priest, acting on behalf of God, is able to forgive sin, but also because it's a human necessity. And so that's again a long answer to why you have to go to a priest.
Create